18 people have been killed and hundreds displaced in a new wave of communal violence in Nigeria's Niger State. Homes have been destroyed, families shattered, and entire communities left facing an uncertain and dangerous future. What began as tension between neighbours has once again erupted into deadly clashes, leaving behind burnt buildings, broken lives, and a deepening sense of fear that peace, even if briefly restored, can still collapse in an instant. For those caught in the middle, there is no political argument, no distant debate, only the immediate reality of survival, of running when violence breaks out, of trying to protect children in moments when nothing feels safe, and of wondering whether home will still be standing when the smoke clears. In the aftermath, survivors describe scenes that are difficult to comprehend. Entire households have fled with nothing but what they could carry. Some walked for hours through unfamiliar roads, others hid in nearby bushes as violence swept through their communities. The sounds of shouting and destruction replaced the normal rhythms of daily life. Farm work, market trade, school runs, all suspended in an instant. What remains is uncertainty. Where do you go when the place you built your life is no longer safe? How do you begin again when everything familiar has been taken away? For many families, this is not the first time that they have been displaced. Across parts of Nigeria, cycles of communal violence have repeated over the years, often driven by disputes over land, resources, and long-standing mistrust between neighbouring groups. Each episode leaves behind not only physical disruption, but emotional wounds that take far longer to heal. Even when calm eventually returns, the fear does not disappear. It lingers in memory, in caution, in the hesitation to rebuild too quickly or trust too easily. Security forces have moved into affected areas in an effort to restore order. But for many residents, the damage has already been done. Markets are closed, schools remain empty, and families are separated, waiting in temporary shelters or staying with relatives in safer areas. Aid workers describe communities in shock, struggling to access food, clean water, and basic medical care. In moments like these, survival becomes the only focus, while everything else, work, education, and routine life, fades into the background. Yet even amid devastation, there are signs of resilience. Neighbours helping neighbours, strangers sharing food, communities trying to rebuild what has been lost, even while the fear of renewed violence remains close. These moments of solidarity stand in stark contrast to the brutality that triggered this displacement, reminding us that even in places torn by conflict, humanity does not disappear. But the deeper question remains unresolved. How many times can communities endure this cycle before something fundamentally changes? Until that answer is found, families in Niger State continue to live with the painful reality that peace can be fragile and that safety, once taken for granted, can vanish in a matter of hours.
Communal violence in parts of Nigeria is rarely the result of a single incident. It is usually the outcome of long-standing tensions that build over time, disputes over land ownership, grazing routes, farming rights, and access to water or resources. In rural communities where livelihoods depend directly on land, even small disagreements can escalate quickly when trust between groups is already fragile. economic pressure and environmental change have made these disputes harder to resolve. As populations grow and usable land becomes more limited, competition intensifies. In some areas, traditional systems of mediation that once helped prevent conflict are under strain, making it more difficult to contain disputes before they turn violent. The human cost of these clashes extends far beyond those killed or injured. Displacement disrupts education, destroys livelihoods, and places enormous pressure on already limited local services. Families who flee often lose not only their homes, but also their crops, livestock, and sources of income, making recovery extremely difficult. Repeated cycles of violence also erode trust between communities. Even after fighting stops, suspicion can remain for years, making reconciliation a slow and fragile process. Many analysts argue that preventing future outbreaks will require not only security responses, but long-term investment in dialogue, fair resource management, and local governance systems that can resolve disputes before they escalate. Despite the challenges, many communities continue to coexist peacefully, and most residents express a desire for stability rather than conflict. The persistence of violence in certain areas highlights how complex and deeply rooted these issues are and how urgently they need sustained attention beyond emergency responses.
The immediate priority is restoring security and ensuring displaced families can return home safely. But the long-term challenge is far more difficult. Without addressing the underlying disputes that fuel these repeated clashes, the cycle of violence risks continuing. Rebuilding homes is possible. Rebuilding trust is far harder. For the families now scattered across Niger State, the hope is simple, that this will not become another temporary pause before the next outbreak, but a turning point where safety, stability, and peace begin to take deeper root. This is Breaking Silence. 3 stories, 3 very different crises. In Venezuela, a nation shaken by disaster and grief. In India, questions of trust, safety, and protection in childcare. In Nigeria, communities torn apart by reoccurring violence and displacement. Different places, different struggles, but the same reality underneath. Ordinary people carrying the weight of systems that fail to protect them when it matters most. These are the stories the powerful would rather keep in the shadows. Stay safe, stay compassionate, and until next time, keep watching, keep caring. And if you missed any part of today's show, be sure to go to our YouTube channel, AsiaOne News. I'm Craig Vermay, and you've been watching Breaking Silence.